So good afternoon. It's a pleasure to see you all here. I'm glad you've chosen to spend your afternoon hearing about how we move from productivity to innovation through the use of a right outsourcing partner. So I'm Mahesh Palgat. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Syngene International. We are a company located in Bangalore, India, with one manufacturing integrated with development, integrated with Discovery Campus, all in one location. I'm going to talk about a little bit, starting with the challenges that we see in the R&D environment. What has the R&D landscape of the pharmaceutical industry gone through over the last few years? Some of the approaches that have been taken to manage these challenges that we see, which will lead me to start talking about certain partnership models that can come across as a way of solving this particular challenge. Within those partnership models, I'll focus a little bit more and give you an insight into dedicated center models and an integrated model that we are working on. This is something that will be a model of success that you will see in Syngene as a way to addressing the innovation challenge that the pharmaceutical industry is going through. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions as well. So what's been going on with regards to the R&D picture in the pharmaceutical industry? What you see from this graph, which is actually a collection of data that comes from Deloitte, BCG, and other pieces of information, is we are seeing a decline in internal rate of return. On one hand, we are seeing that about 20% of the top-line revenues from pharmaceutical companies are being put into R&D. However, that investment is not yielding a return at a rate that we would like to see the return at. There's in fact a decline on the internal rate of return to the point of where, as an aggregate industry, the internal rate of return on this is below the cost of capital, which means you're not even really recovering all of the capital that you have put in from the R&D investments that you're doing. And it will continue to decline based on the predictions that you see here with the references that are there on this particular slide. This has an implication with regards to how much time and money is spent in evolving a drug through the commercialization continuum. If you look at this from the left to the right, we start with discovery, where you have the target identification, lead generation, and all of the other components related to the discovery part of the drug development and drug manufacturing business. Moving into development and then ultimately into commercialization, which with product launch as a key milestone that you get to. This slide in itself is probably not new to many of you. But what is hopefully new is the fact that on an average, if you're talking about 14 years to go through this entire journey, at an expense of about $2 to $3 billion, this is actually getting even more and more complex. This is actually getting more and more challenging because over the last few years, we've seen 17% increase in the timeline that it takes to get to preclinical stage itself, a 58% increase in time that it takes to get to phase 1 development, which means you're going to continuously face the challenge of spending more money, waiting longer to actually reach the finish line of when you can launch your product and start to benefit the patients out there and also start making revenues. So what has the industry done to address this particular challenge? Hopefully I've convinced you by now that this is definitely a challenge and the pharmaceutical industry does need to look at this. There are certain models and certain approaches that the pharmaceutical industry has taken to look at this. One of it is to start going back to the basics, start going back to roots, looking at the academic institutions, looking at academic collaborations, bringing in innovation through such partnerships. The next bit is by working on the technology approaches such as crowdsourcing, ideations, open ways of getting more and more information, more and more thought processes and ideas going. There's, of course, the traditional way, which is about mergers and acquisitions. We hear about those all the time. 2019 has been a year where we started out with some big mergers and acquisitions. We've heard about BMS, Syngene, and others as well. But those are always a component of where there is some ones that are successful and others that are not. Let me talk more about the last two, where we are talking about establishing external partnerships for R&D. And the other one, which is about use of outsourcing and virtualization to manage this particular challenge that we talked about. At the end of the day, if you keep innovation as your key metric, you look at all of the opportunities that are there in the middle of the slide here that are reflected as the different components of what you need to do to get to the finish line, and they become your opportunity for partnerships, whether it's in chemistry, whether it's in biology, clinical, safety, so on and so forth. All of that is where one starts to look at and say, which of these pieces I want to partner on, which of these pieces I want to bring the efficiency and innovation on to be able to get the most out of this particular relationship and address the particular challenge that we've talked about. It's worth noting the text here in red. If you look at 2016, outsourcing in the R&D industry was about 20 billion. It's likely to get to about 40 billion plus in 20 years. This is the scale at which R&D outsourcing is going to grow, and that's where it becomes really important to make sure you have the right partner who's working with you on this particular challenge. Before I get into talking about the different ways of doing this, let me start by talking about the traditional models for outsourcing. The traditional models for outsourcing are two that are called out here. One is called the FTE, or the full-time equivalence. The other is FFS, which is fee for service. The full-time equivalence is where you have dedicated resources that are specific for the type of work that you want to accomplish with the outsourcing partner, such as Syngene. The deliverables and the team composition can evolve over time. You may start out with saying that I need a certain number of chemists that are working on our programs to begin with, and later on, as the programs progress, you want to talk about having biologists who work with you, or then clinical scientists who work with you, and so on and so forth. It's typically a 3-year contract where you then look at renewing that contract or modifying that contract based on how programs evolve. And this is good for longer-term research. The fee for service is more of a model where there may be less predictability in the work that you have. There may be defined project goals, but not necessarily the amount and volume of work that exists. Therefore, you approach the outsourcing partners such as Syngene again to say, we need to accomplish a certain project, we need to accomplish a certain goal, and for that we need all of the resources that will be required from your end to make that happen. But those are the traditional models, and those do not help you build the bridge between what you need in the lack of a good pipeline to get to actually the innovation bridge that is actually to be built. The components then that you really need to focus on with regards to using for driving your decisions on how to outsource, what to outsource, and what kind of a mechanism you want to work with are actually the ones displayed here. So there's 4 different ones that I'm referred to here. One is called the component play. This is very tactical. This is something that would come to you as an answer if you're asking the question of why do we want to outsource? When you ask the question of why do you want to outsource and you're thinking it's more tactical, it's more about cost arbitrage, you're likely going to say we need to work with just a staff augmentation capability and want to bring in a partner such as Syngene for filling that gap. A cluster play is a little bit more advanced, where you want to look at and say, this is the opportunity for us to have a higher degree of partnership. There are certain programs that we are going to run in-house, but there are certain programs that we may work with a partner such as Syngene on, have more than just one capability that Syngene brings to the table, and helps you advance your programs through such a partnership and through such a relationship that is built. The more interesting ones, where you want to actually use this to build a partnership from an innovation perspective, is the integrated play and the dedicated play. This is where you change focus from cost arbitrage, from a very tactical one to actually a much more strategic one, and you start to build a continuum of knowledge with a partner such as Syngene. You outsource all of the aspects of a given program to Syngene, and this helps you build the capability, the knowledge, the expertise, and the background on how that program will be executed, all the way from early stage development to late stage development. One of the reasons Syngene is very capable of doing this is because we are an end-to-end partner, going all the way from discovery to commercial manufacturing, working both on large molecules and small molecules, all in an integrated campus. In this model, what happens is Syngene takes on the responsibility for all of the deliverables that may be required to support the program in its entirety. If there is something that has to be further outsourced, if there is some capability that has to be built, it is the responsibility of Syngene to take that on and make that available so that the program can progress. Having established this, let me take a few minutes now to explain to you with a case study how an integrated play model would work and has actually been able to deliver for one of our customers in Syngene. Without getting into the name of the specific customers, I wanted to take you through what you see on this slide here is where Syngene started working with a partner who had a molecule but did not have the capabilities in-house to actually produce the material and take the molecule to the entire program. So they started working with us early on, producing the material at the sub 1 kilo scale, and continued working with us to develop the process for having tox material in place, the FIH material in place, phase 2 and 3, and then eventually the commercial manufacturing. So we started with a scale of below 1 kg, and now are at a scale of producing at a 600 kg level. This is the integrated opportunity that comes in of working with one partner. Let's go beyond that. This is simply about delivering the material. But what you do in this process is you actually build knowledge on the program. You actually build the right opportunities for introducing QBD. You actually build right opportunities for looking at the strategies for cleaning validation. You look at the strategies for process optimization. Along the way, before we even got to commercial production, in this particular case, we were able to reduce the steps for this particular synthesis from 17 to 12. On one of the steps, we were able to take the yield from 5% to 23%. We were able to build second sourcing vendors much earlier than you would normally do when you get into your commercial manufacturing. So that upfront engagement that you get to build, one, a strong, robust process, second, a very strong and comprehensive CMC package, plus having the right clinical supplies at the time that is required, is all what you get by working with an integrated partner in an integrated play and an integrated approach as the one that you see here. This was for a Japanese client, so this is where we also got accredited as a foreign manufacturer. We were also then qualified and ready for the PMDA inspection at the right time, and we were able to get that PMDA inspection to where today we are now supplying commercial material for this particular manufacturer. So that's an example of how an integrated play works. You start the engagement at one end, and you continue in a strategic relationship, bringing in the components of innovation where it is required. This is, again, going back to how we want to partner and build a relationship as opposed to doing only a piecemeal engagement. Let me now move on to talking about the dedicated centers. The dedicated center, this is represented in this particular slide here, as something where you have dedicated capabilities. That's the one that is shown in the light blue, and this is only for illustration purposes. Depending upon what program or how the engagement is, what are the components of that dedicated center can vary. Today, what I've shown here has discovery chemistry, biology, process development, clinical studies, biologics. For for a specific program, we may want, instead of biologics, it actually has formulation scientists who are ring-fenced, who are specifically dedicated to working only on that particular client's program. Let's take the example of somebody who wants to just outsource their entire cardiovascular program. This is a model that would work for something like that, where you have the right kind of scientists who are producing analogs, who are doing the biology and the assay development for those, who are doing the clinical work for that, who are then taking it through any other components of biology or biologics that may come in with complex programs and so on. Apart from the dedicated center where you have these folks who are now working on executing the experiments, executing the processes, executing the business in synchronization with the sponsor organization, these folks have the support of everything that you see on the periphery to essentially then have access to a full-fledged pharmaceutical organization without actually having to invest or manage that whole organization. Because, like I said, you do have the shared functions, some of which may become part of a dedicated center, or some may not be part of the dedicated center. But you also then have access to the enabling functions. This is the ones who are taking care of your things with regards to HR. You know, what is the, do you have the right level of staffing? Do you have the right level of utilities? Do you have the right level of recognition for the EHS requirements of the site, so on and so forth? Do you have the right level of quality regulatory readiness? All of that is what you get when you work in a dedicated center model with Syngene. And let me elaborate on that a little bit more, if I can get the slide to advance. Can I get the slide to advance, please? Yeah, okay. So this then further highlights to you from a different perspective how this dedicated center model is beneficial and a win-win relationship. What you see on the left are all of the more technical functions where the sponsor or the innovator company has the opportunity to work directly on the scientific aspects with the staff in Syngene. So therefore, they are in direct contact of understanding how science is progressing, how the programs are progressing, while also getting all of the other components through a very strong project management team in place, so that the logistic aspects of when materials are going to get sent off, shipped, when we are going to have our next meeting, when are we going to have our next update, when are some packages going to be ready from a CMC perspective, when are some audits going to happen, all of that is managed through a strong project management team. So you have the project management team that comes from Syngene, you have the technical team that comes from Syngene in a very dedicated manner for your programs of interest, and then you are in the center of this, receiving information to only coordinate and get things done at the right levels. Of course, all of this then has to work with a set of benefits that we've been able to see, and I'll talk about some of this. This is a busy slide, I recognize, but what's important to understand is that this model, not only does it nurture innovation, it actually gives you the opportunity to have a very good level of understanding of where your programs stand, despite the fact that they are working with an outsourcing partner, which is always a concern when you start out with outsourcing partners. We've been able to demonstrate that operational efficiencies don't go down. In fact, they go up. We've actually seen 20 to 25% improvement in operational efficiencies on a per FTE basis on molecules synthesized, number of assays completed, turnaround times, and also on the manufacturing aspect of it. Then there is the part that because these scientists are part of a dedicated center, they have the sense of pride, they have the sense of alignment and recognition with the pharma or the other major company that they're working with, and hence become part of an innovation network for the company to utilize and for the company to start building from a strategic projects management perspective. Key in this is, of course, governance and management of the relationship, which is where we have a multi-tiered governance system that is set up, direct access to the scientists who are actually conducting the work, but also regularly set up framework for steering committee level meetings to be able to drive decisions that are required on program management and taking these relationships forward. Last but not least, the focus on infrastructure and facility. This is something that you don't have to worry about when you work in such a model. The aspects about whether EHS standards are in place, the aspects about whether staffing is in place, whether food, canteen, so on and so forth supplies are all there. This is where we are able to take care of and not put that burden on the company that is coming to us as a partner. The last bit on that slide is very, very important to mention. What this does is, because you have access to a whole pharmaceutical company in one campus and in one location, with capabilities in small molecules and large molecules, it gives you the opportunity to also work with us on very specific requirements that may come up, where there may be some equipment or some capabilities that is not going to be part of the dedicated center because its utilization will be low, but is part of our shared analytical facility, and therefore is accessible on an as-needed basis. Putting all of it together is how this dedicated center model really works. So the dedicated centers that we have at Syngene are the ones that are shown here, and there is, of course, more that are that are under development. I don't want to go through each one of these. These are available on our website, but in all of these are multi-level, multi-year contracts that we've had. Many of them that have already gone through their first renewal, and where we've continued to add the number of FTEs that are part of the dedicated centers, and we will continue to add the capabilities that are there as well. Because all of these have seen that this is a strategic relationship that you enter into, and you just build on this relationship, starting with a smaller experiment or a smaller program. In summary, what I do want to mention is, I hope I've convinced you that the pipeline is a challenge in the R&D, in the R&D component of the pharmaceutical business. ROI is a challenge. We are pumping in a lot of money, but we're actually not getting the level of returns that we would like to see, which therefore needs to be managed through many different solutions. Mergers and acquisitions may be one of them. Working with small biotechs, working with academic institutions may be another component. But on top of that is where external outsourcing fits in. We've seen the numbers, external outsourcing numbers will continue to rise. And that's where every one of you starts to think about and say, who's the right partner that I want to work with? What are the right questions that I need to understand? What is the kind of relationship that I want to build with that partner? And that's where you start talking about a dedicated center model. The dedicated center model brings you the opportunity of being essentially an extended arm of your own company in another location in India, with dedicated teams that are available, customizable to build the right capabilities within that dedicated center, within the ring fence that you have, to ultimately get you to the blue sky version of what your strategic vision may be on a certain program, on a certain vertical that you want to develop but don't have the resources, don't have the wherewithal to put in that much energy internally. And this is where Syngene can be your partner to bringing unique capabilities because of our end-to-end experience that we've had, and I've shown you some of those, along with the large and small molecule diversity of experience that we have, the strong biology focus, the strong chemistry focus, and the large molecule focus that we have, leading us to being a preferred partner for your bench to bedside solutions.